So, as of late, there's been a lot of interest in leaving Google services in a process that a lot of people call de-Googling. And of course, one of Google's biggest products is its Google search. So naturally, people want to try and replace that first, and it's probably the most important Google service that you can replace. Now, there are several Google alternatives, such as DuckDuckGo, Quant, and others. But I think the search engine that we're going to look at today is probably the best Google search alternative. As well as being a great alternative to Google, it's also completely open source, can be self-hosted, and collects no user data, making this by far the most freedom-respecting Google alternative. But with all of that said, let's take a look at it right now on the Linux Lounge. So indeed, today we're going to be looking at this, SearX. Now, what is SearX? Well, SearX is, as I said, a totally open source search engine, although it's a little bit unconventional for a search engine. It doesn't go out and find websites using its own web crawlers, instead it pulls results from other search engines and websites. As a result of this, SearX delivers very good results and can be customized a great deal to modify what site SearX queries for results, but more on that later. I should also point out that although SearX pulls results from other sites, it's a very private search engine and collects no user data. The sites that you're searching only see SearX connecting to them, not you. So SearX is actually more private than DuckDuckGo, for example. But with all that said, let's just go ahead and quickly make a search to show you what everything looks like. So let's just say we want to search for Linux, hypothetically. And you can see it's fairly quick. It's a little bit slower than like DuckDuckGo, for example, but that's just because it's querying so many sites. So as you can see, we have a pretty normal search engine. It looks very much like Google, and it gives you all of your results, relevant information and that sort of thing. Now, it does look very much like Google, as I said, but there's some key differences. So for example, we can see on the side of our results, it will actually show you what site we've got it from. So for example, the first result is from Wikipedia. Well, no, the second result's from Wikipedia. The first one is from Wikidata. If we go down, we've got a result from Etym Online, which tells us the etymology of the word Linux. We have a few results from, well, a lot of results from Library Genesis. I might actually want to turn that off, but that's good if you want to get books and stuff. You can see down here we've got a result from Bing. So it's given us all sorts of results, and they're all pretty relevant. In fact, the first result being Wikipedia is quite handy. Now, as I say, it has several incredibly handy categories at the top. You've got general, files, images, the usual stuff. I find the files to be quite handy, but for some reason on this instance it's not working, which is something that sometimes does happen. We can of course change our search region and stuff, and you can narrow it by time. The image search works fairly well too. You've got like pictures of Linux and stuff. Now, of course, it's not quite as good as something like Google, but it also doesn't collect any user data, so you wouldn't really expect it to be. There's also like not all the incredibly powerful features that Google has to narrow down your images and stuff, but, well, I mean, SearX has some features that Google doesn't, so, you give and you take, I suppose. So you can see, for all intents and purposes, it's a fairly standard search engine. But this is where things get cool. If we go into preferences, we can see that we have a variety of options. Now first you see all the usual settings as you would expect from a search engine, like your safe search, your language, interface language, like where you're getting the autocomplete from is quite handy. But this is where things get really interesting. We also have themes. Now these are very in-depth and actually change the whole UI a lot. Now if we go into themes and we set it to, for instance, pixel art, and then we go down and click save, as you can see it looks completely different. So let's just go ahead and make the same search. And for some reason this theme is a little bit wonky in the way that it works. Like for some reason it kind of stops SearX from working, but like as you can see this looks completely different, even if it doesn't actually work. But now if we just go back and change it, and we can hit save, and yeah, it goes right back. So that's a very handy feature and really gives you some customization on your search engine. You can also change the default categories and stuff. But this is where things get very interesting. Now this is by far the coolest part about SearX. If we go into engines, you can see a list of sites you can get SearX to query. Now, you've got your usual stuff like Bing, DuckDuckGo, Google, Yahoo. So you can essentially use this as any of those sites if you particularly want to. Like, you could turn all of those off and have it just query Google. But you've got some really interesting stuff like etymology or Etym if you want to know the etymology of words right in your search engine. You've got Wikipedia, you have Reddit, you have Mosaic, which is another search engine. You've got, all sorts of stuff. And you've got quite a lot of in-depth information on them too. You've got the amount of time that generally takes to query it. You've got, your safe search stuff, so you can turn on or off safe search. You have whether or not it supports the language you've selected. And you have a shortcut. So essentially what the shortcut is a bit like the DuckDuckGo bangs feature. You can get it to essentially just query from that site if you instruct it to. You've got different engines for files, images, maps, music. Now some of these sites you can get it to query for things are a little bit less than legal, shall we say. Like, for instance, you can set it to query the Pirate Bay, and for some reason that's on by default. But alright. You can have it to query news sites, which is quite handy for me. You can set it to query science sites, social media, videos, and that sort of thing. And there's some really handy things you can get it to query as well. So for instance, if you want to listen to music, you can set it to query Nvidius as opposed to YouTube and listen to your music privately through Nvidius. So that's incredibly handy. Now, I think that's pretty much all I've got to say about SearX itself. It's a very good search engine and I have no complaints with it. The results are very relevant. It's not quite as good as Google, but of course they don't collect all of your data, so that's to be expected. I'd probably say it's better than DuckDuckGo most of the time though, but of course it's probably because it's querying results from Google. Now, if you want to start using this, how do you do it, you might ask? Well, as it's free and open source and you can self-host it, there are lots of instances for it. As you can see, there's a lot. Now, which one of these do I recommend you use? Well, personally, I use the one for snopture.org, I believe it's pronounced. And the reason I use this is simply because they host lots of other open source web programs. However, there's several others that you can use, and SearX has an official list that you can, or well, kind of an official list that you can check, and I'd probably recommend that you go through a few of these and see which one you like the best. The one at the top will probably be the fastest for your area. So for example, if we go on it, you can see it's pretty much just SearX. And if we go down to the next one, pretty much the same thing. Now, like I say, these are all kind of similar things, just hosted by different people. So if there's one specifically that you want to use, you should probably use it. And once you've picked your search engine, go ahead and click on it. And how do you set this to the default? Well, there's any number of ways you can do it, and some of them are a little bit wonky and don't tend to work. I think the sort of semi-official way is if you go into About, you can see the About page. They have a GitHub, a Twitter, an IRC, and there's reasons why you would want to use it, which as I've said. And there's how it works, but also there's how do I set it to the default search engine. If we go ahead and click install, you can see nothing happens. Now, theoretically, what is supposed to happen is this will install something that will set the default search engine to SearX. But I think it's about 50-50 as to whether or not it will actually work on the instance that you're using. So for example, if we go into the one that I commonly use, also doesn't work. But eventually if we go through the list, one of them will. But the alternative way to do it is to just simply click on the little search thing, add the search engine, and then it will go ahead and install it for you. And that's how you do it on Firefox. Probably different for other browsers, but there are other ways to install SearX onto your browser as well. So yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say about it. This is an absolutely fantastic piece of open source software and is easily a replacement to Google. In fact, I like this vastly better than Google because it really does have all of those features that make all the difference for a power user like me. But if you just want a simple search engine that won't track you, well, this is also a fantastic option out there. especially since DuckDuckGo is beginning to sort of get a little bit bigger. I think some people are starting to get a little bit worried about it because it's not open source, and there's always the possibility that they might collect user data. But with this, there's very little chance that it will actually collect user data because it's open source. You can check all the code, you can host your own instance for reasonably cheap if you're paranoid about it. But yeah, fantastic piece of software. Definitely go and give it a look if you're looking for a Google alternative. And with that said, I thank you for watching today's video, and I will see you in the next one.